I tell people until 35, it's what you know. Until 45, it's who you know. After 45, it's who knows you. So it's technical skills, it's networking, and then it's reputation.
Hey folks, welcome back to Executive Runtime. I'm your host, Johnny Austin. Today I have a very special guest, Rory Verrett. Rory places C-suite leaders for companies like Patagonia and the NFL. He's assessed thousands of executives and knows exactly what separates the ones who get hired from the ones who don't. Rory, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here, Johnny. Happy to be here.
So for the folks listening, this is different. This is unprecedented in the show's 1-year history at this point. Generally, what we do is we talk to executives themselves and kind of go deep into their particular stories. And the idea of the show itself is to kind of extrapolate whatever patterns we can around who's successful versus who's not. But for this particular episode, I thought it might be interesting to talk to someone who themselves have been able to look at these patterns across many different executives, many different companies, and sort of act as an aggregator to kind of, help calibrate where we are in our journey and learning about these executives. And then also to kind of let us know maybe what our blind spots are. And so we'll have plenty of time to get into that. But before we do, Rory, could you just kind of, give the audience a little bit more information about your background and maybe how you kind of found your way into search?
Excellent. I am a graduate of Howard University, HU, and also went to Harvard Law School. I mentioned that because I practiced law for exactly 11 months and then pivoted to a career in entrepreneurship after that. When that career was sort of waning, I mean, the company I was running sort of had run its course. I started looking for a job. A friend of mine sent my resume to an executive search firm. And the executive search firm said, we actually have an opportunity that might match your background. It was in public affairs, which was my profession before I became an entrepreneur and kind of overlapped with my entrepreneurial venture in some ways. So I go to the search firm and they start telling me, you'd be a great executive recruiter. And I'm like, I don't think so. I don't really know what this profession is. Let's get back to the public policy search at that utility company. And they kept sort of talking to me. And then I took the test that this search firm used to evaluate consultants. And my results come back and the head of executive assessment for the firm is like, I have your results. I'm like, see, I probably failed the test. We should move on from this executive search scenario. And he says, actually, it's the highest score we've ever seen in the history of the firm. I'm like, I don't even know what you all do. He's like, you don't have to know what we do. This is an orientation about the kind of work that we do and the way you work, the way you solve problems, your personality disposition, your leadership competencies are well suited to executive search. But I think you might be too entrepreneurial for a big firm. That's the caveat. That was 20 years ago. I went to that search firm. That was Russell Reynolds. I was then recruited to Spencer Stewart, another search firm. The NFL was Spencer Stewart's client, and I began working on the NFL account. I placed the head of HR. The head of HR said, I want you to be my number 2. So I went to the NFL as the head of talent management, which included recruiting, but also leadership development, succession planning, talent mobility, and the like. Did that for a few years, wound up going to a public affairs firm I was trying to recruit to represent the NFL because I was moving to the head of public affairs role. Mm-hmm. And I got there and I started a podcast called Protégé. The podcast went viral 2016 and people started calling me to do executive recruiting and they kept calling and I decided I'd try it out. And that was 10 years ago. I started the search firm called Protégé Search on the heels of the podcast.
That's amazing. And so the podcast basically kind of launched that entrepreneurial momentum, so to speak, and really allows you to kind of go off on your own and do your own thing.
That's right. That's right. It really forced me to calibrate what I was really good at, what I call my true north, and what I also enjoyed doing. I mean, I'd spent sort of half of my career in public affairs, half of my career in talent, often with those two things overlapping. I'm recruiting public affairs executives. I'm co-leading the DEI practice at this firm, the Raven Group, and I'm standing up a sports public affairs practice. And so I was at a crossroads, and I think the market told me, hey man, you're a headhunter, you're not a lobbyist. Like you missed the whole lobbying scenario during the Obama years. That was sort of the indispensable credential to be a really senior public affairs leader, that you had worked in the Obama administration or had some kind of senior role. I was doing executive recruiting. So I think the market told me that. I yielded to that, and I think that was the right call.
So speaking of your business a little bit, I want to take a moment to kind of maybe clear up one of the biggest misconceptions about your business and how it works. Can you talk about who actually hires you and who you're working on behalf when you're actually out there in the field looking for people?
That's a great question, because it is a huge misnomer. Our search clients are companies. So a company calls us to manage a search process. They say, we're looking for a CFO. We're the Seattle Mariners. We're looking for the president of our club. We're Princess Paisley Park. We're looking for the CEO of the concert venue. We are Westminster Kennel Club. We're looking for our head of communications. And we run a process which puts us in the market, looking for talent, evaluating people, and then managing that process from 12 candidates that we present to 6 that they interview to 3 finalists to 1 placement executive. A lot of executives who are not familiar with retained executive search think that we are a contingency firm. So people will say, I've got a great client for you, my friend Brad. I'm like, is Brad interested in me recruiting for his company? No, Brad's looking for a job. That's not our client. It's like going to a coffee factory and saying, I'd like a cappuccino. The factory is a B2B company. They sell their beans to Starbucks or other coffee companies and cafes. You're the consumer, right? You go to Starbucks, they're a B2C company. So we are a B2B company. We sell to companies. That's our clients.
Yep. So for the folks who are hearing this and maybe, a little bit disappointed, how do they get on your radar, right? For the folks who are looking to land these executive roles and kind of be on folks like your radar when it's time to actually fill these roles, like how do they get to a place where you find them and actually court them, so to speak, on, stepping into these roles potentially?
I would sort of rephrase the notion of being on a recruiter's radar, because in 20 years, I've never run across a candidate, an executive, after we've done a search and been like, oh my God, Johnny would have been great for that, San Francisco Giants chief marketing officer job. Now, you might have been really interested in that job. You might have really wanted that job, but I've literally never run across someone and say, oh, I wish we had called them. The database world is now public. With the right amount of money, you can access public databases like LinkedIn that has 800 million profiles in it. 800 million profiles in it. We have other databases that can find every single cell phone you've ever had going back to 1995. I've called people 6-7 times on every cell phone to try to find them because they were a great candidate. I think the value of a relationship with an executive recruiter is, I think it's mainly twofold. One, it's to understand what people like you can do in their career. I'll give an example. Sometimes I'll talk to heads of human resources and they'll say, I've been a CHRO at this company and I'm looking for my next gig. I don't know if I want to be a CHRO of another big company. I don't know if I want to be a CHRO, and here's why. I'll listen to them and I'll say, have you ever considered being a chief talent officer for a private equity fund? No. Tell me about that. Well, here's that job. You don't do a lot of the transactional work. The heads of HR of the companies do that. You are a senior strategist for the portfolio to make sure there's consistency and systematic processes across the portfolio of 10, 20, 30 different companies. The same is true for a venture capital firm. So you get a base, a bonus, and you get carry in that fund. So if you stay there for a vesting period or 2, it can be easily a 7-figure job, sometimes well into 7 figures. Somebody might not know that. They may think my only option is to go to a competitor to my company as my next job. So that's one thing that can be helpful is learning other opportunities that are in your function or business unit that you can do. The second thing is to understand compensation. If a headhunter calls you, a lot of times people will take the call. Thank you. No, I don't know anybody who would be a great chief marketing officer, or they don't return the call. Calling you and you're a marketing executive and you're like, I don't want to leave New York to go to San Francisco to be a baseball club CMO. Understandable. It's not everybody's cup of tea, but you could say, hey, by the way, what does that pay? Oh, it pays, I'm making this up, this is not the right number, $750. Oh, wow, $750? That's amazing. How many of these searches have you done? Well, maybe we've done 10 of these. And then the person tells me I make 400,000. All right. That's incredibly important information for you to know what your market value is and if your company is underpaying you. I know a head of HR who works for a sports club whose base salary is $750,000. Her base salary is 700, right? How many HR leaders make that? I would say that's probably, not 2% of the market. But if you knew that and you knew this club was in, I'm making it up, California, you might take the call from the next headhunter who says, hey, we're looking for a chief human resource officer for, a hockey club. Who knew?
Yes.
So I think it's to get market information about roles and market information about compensation. I think the staying on the radar piece, I think it's a decent notion. I just don't know if it pays off in the way I think candidates need. Most candidates, when they talk to me, they are in sort of exigent circumstances. They really want to get out of where they are. They're in a 3 to 6 month window where they got to leave. And a headhunter can't just flip a switch and say, oh, by the way, you matched one of my clients. In 20 years, I've had 3 people that I've talked to in my network that said, hey, I'm in a job search right now. And I go look at our portfolio. I'm like, would you be interested in this role? And they say, actually, yes. In both cases, it involved a relocation. In one case, it didn't. But it's extremely rare. I tell people, your next job is coming from the people in your phone.
So TLDR here is don't call us, we'll call you sort of situation, which makes a lot of sense.
You don't want to sound like a jerk, but it's, I will find you. I mean, in my title is the word hunter. It's like, if you're a wildebeest in a forest and I'm hungry, chances are I'm going to find you.
Yep. Got it. So reading kind of, digging a little bit deeper into what actually goes into a lot of these searches. So when a CEO or a board or whomever comes to you, what are they actually asking for? And, that they're not saying out loud. What are the patterns you've seen in terms of what actually, are the goods that people need to deliver when they're looking to fill these roles?
Another very astute question about this that people I think miss. Companies hire for the life cycle they're in, for the season that they're in. Try to keep it simple when I talk to CEOs, heads of HR or boards or search committees. And I'll start the conversation with, let's look at a continuum of change leadership going across an XY axis from the lower left to the upper right. And let's think about this leader as a steward. Nothing's broken, just manage a bunch of processes or business functions or a business that's operating efficiently. Or they are looking for a reformer. A little less than half of this needs to be improved, but it's mainly working, but we're at a fork in the road where we got to make some changes. Or are you looking for, in the upper left-hand corner, a disruptor? So steward, reformer, disruptor. A disruptor, there is no process. There is no business unit. You are starting something up, or it is completely broken. We got to build it from scratch. And I'll get a sense of what that client is looking for among the other qualifications for the role, among the other leadership competencies. And so when we're doing a search and we get down to the finalists and the 2 people that don't get it, I got to call them and tell them, hey, you didn't get it, Johnny got it. I don't say Johnny got it, but someone else got it. Often, almost always, it is, you are a steward, and they want a reformer. You're a disruptor and they want a steward. You're a reformer and they want a disruptor. Like, you're just not the right person and leader for the season and life cycle this organization is going through, or this function is going through. It's not that you're not qualified. I remember a really tough call I had once with a candidate, and she was like, I cannot believe I didn't get this job. I cannot believe I'm not qualified for this job. I said, you are eminently qualified for this job. You are the walking, well, why didn't I get it? We looked at 1,200 resumes. 1,200 resumes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Somebody is going to lose at the Olympics to Usain Bolt. In human history is in the 0.001% of the fastest humans in human history. You just ran up against the absolute fastest. In an executive search, most times, 90% of the time, the person that gets the job won it by a hair. It's like the Olympics. Everybody's qualified. Everybody's got great credentials. Everybody interviews well. Everybody's got great references. Everybody does great on the case study. It becomes, what season are we in? What life cycle are we in? And is this the right leader for this moment for us right now?
You specialize in purpose-driven organization.
Mm-hmm.
Does that change what, quote, great leadership looks like compared to, I don't want to say purely profit-driven companies, right? They're all trying to make a profit, but what does that having that purpose out front change about the great leadership that these companies look for?
I think it adds for companies sort of a third P. There's profit, performance, and then there's purpose. If you're a nonprofit, it's performance and purpose. But purpose is an amalgam of a lot of values around how you lead. Are you collaborative? Do you lead with a value system that the people on your team understand and the people you report to understand and your peers understand? Is there a triple bottom line to how you operate? Are you thinking about the communities you serve? Are you thinking about, in some cases, the environmental impact of what you do? And are you thinking about operating in a great governance model of high integrity and high stewardship? So values-driven organizations could be nonprofits, they could be corporations, they could be large multinational corporations. I mean, one of the most value-driven companies in the world is Unilever, and they're a behemoth, largely considered one of the world's most sustainable companies. Patagonia is a large company, largely considered a highly ethical and sustainable company. So I think purpose-driven is a collection of values. That means you're not just going to stop at profit and you're not going to stop at performance. You're going to add collaboration, values, thinking about not just Wall Street or your quarterly report, but another set of stakeholders that you are beholden to.
Going back to individuals for a second, I'm curious, for the best operators out there, what do they have in common that maybe doesn't show up on a resume or a LinkedIn profile, but it's just the thing that you notice once you talk to them or once you start interacting and building a relationship with them? What are those things that kind of stand out to you?
The first thing is followership. They are not just functionally excellent. They have a cadre of people that they have worked with throughout their career, or in some cases in their current role, that will vouch for them, that will walk through walls for them, that will move across country to work for them if they start or launch a new business unit or take over a new functional unit inside the organization. They're not just great executors of the work that they do. They have helped people, mentored people, stood in the gap when others were in need. And so when the company announces that that person is going to be the leader of this organization or this function, they get a followership that is ready to break through walls for them. And the other candidates are simply great at their job. They're functionally great at their job, but no one's going to charge the mountain because of them. They're going to look at them as like, hey, I respect you. You're technically expert, but it doesn't go beyond that. The 1% leaders are the people that have followership. They have a wake of good vibes, good relationships, good stakeholders that will bust through walls to help them at any point. They will move across country to join their new company because they believe in them so much.
Yeah. How do you verify this? Is this something that happens sort of like in the reference check step? Do you do reference checks, or how does this work?
It comes out in the referencing some ways, but it also comes out in just the kinds of questions and vetting that we do of candidates. If you ask me, that question, there would be maybe a different answer than some of my competitors. I mean, the name of my firm is Protégé. I mean, we have kind of built our firm on this ethos. And so, I mean, I'm not bragging, but it might be a different answer. If you ask me about, innovation and the use of AI, I mean, we're dabbling our toe in that water, but we're not the most technologically sophisticated search firm. So if you ask me that question or another search firm that leans into technology, they might have a really whiz-bang answer. And I'd be like, yeah, we're on the margins, improving efficiencies and using AI for sourcing, but we're not, we don't have anybody from MIT. We don't have a CIO at our firm. Yeah. So I think it's how you vet the candidates, how you create a process that yields that in terms of when they see the client, what kinds of questions are in that interview guide that you give the client. And then the referencing process will also yield some of that as well.
On the flip side of that, who are the people, what are the things that kind of stand out as red flags for someone who otherwise looks great on paper, but then maybe you have that interaction with them and you're like, you're probably not the person for this role?
This is going to sound crazy. The interview.
Okay.
The interview. I can't tell you how many times, I have seen a candidate, and it's a very similar fact pattern. It's somebody that the last time they were in a jump ball job search, like it was really a toss up about who was going to get who was going to get the role among the candidates. They may have gone to a company, been promoted twice. Maybe there was some internal competition, but the last time they may have done a real serious job search, first of all, they were mid-career or middle management. It was a director job. And now they're interviewing for an SVP job, and they haven't interviewed in a while. And so the last interview they had for a director job, you probably have some competency-based questions. You may not. You may have an internal recruiter who's just vetting you against, the position spec. And then you get to an SVP job where there's a search committee. There is an executive search consultant like myself. There is a case study, and the interview has a very high bar for performance. I'm asking you competency-based questions. I'm asking you for anecdotes. I'm probing. I'm kind of cross-examining you. I am asking you critical questions. So is the search committee. When they get my evaluation of my screen of you, they're asking more critical questions. And a lot of people are just not prepared for that. They just think it's a conversation and I'm going to be my authentic self. And I mean, no diss, but like I'm a Harvard trained lawyer asking you questions like you're on the stand. When I interview people, I imagine them on a stand in a courtroom and I'm pacing in front of them. Give me an example of this. Give me an example. And I'm imagining that my client is the judge. And are they happy that I'm keeping that candidate, honest? Interviews are not supposed to be easy. My daughter just had an interview for college, okay? This is a college interview, a very elite program. They asked her 10 questions in 20 minutes.
Oh, wow.
10 questions. Good thing we had prepared 12 times for that interview because she wasn't flustered. Had she just gone up there and like, okay, I know my background. I've written my personal statement. No, they were asking her adult questions. I was like, this is serious. This is harder than some of my interviews. So I think people way underestimate the power and the impact of a great interview and how that is the great differentiator in a search. Full stop. It is once I'm interviewing you, okay, you have been filtered by AI. You have been filtered by a real human sourcing consultant in our team. I have interviewed you. By the time you get to the client, if you make the dozen or so profiles we send to a client, you are qualified for the job. Guess what happens then? Zzz, reset. Everything resets. Now you got to interview. And most people think my resume will precede you. No, again, you're running against Usain Bolt. You're running against Jackie Joyner-Kersee. None of that matters. Everybody's qualified. Are you going to have, in the game of inches, are you going to win a centimeter, a half inch, an inch and a half on the interview, on the case study, on the references, on the follow-up, on the emails? right? That's the person that wins. But the biggest evaluation scenario by far, I would say upwards of 90% of your candidacy is your interview performance.
Mhm. So what's key to that interview performance? Is it really about having specific stories that are measurable with impact, or what are the things that really help people stand out in that situation?
You first have to know the structure and know, as it were, the curveballs and the fastballs I'm throwing at you. And I don't mean
Yeah.
curveballs like it's a question that's meant to throw you off, but I look at resumes every day. I have been recruiting for 20 years. There's no fact pattern I have not seen or recognized. All I look at, all I do all day is interview people. So I'm going to know what's up with that transition. That's not going to get past me or any recruiter worth their salt. So do you have a question, and do you have an answer prepared rather for the question of 3 jobs that ended before 2 years? Do you have an answer to that? That's going to survive scrutiny, not just, oh, well, the company went through a reorg.
hmm
Really? Because I was in that industry, and I remember the reorg happening 2 years later from that. I mean, I remember Brad was your boss. I mean, headhunters, we are stewed and steeped in this. So I'm going to ask you about all your transitions. I'm going to ask you an elevator pitch question. Why are you here? So Johnny, tell me why you're here. That's not, oh my God, I really want this job at, GE. No, it's meant to be an elevator pitch, a 3-sentence answer that highlights your leadership competencies. When I ask you leadership competencies questions, do you know the structure of a great leadership competency answer? Do you know how to land the plane? When I ask you, do you have any questions for me? Do you know what to do in that scenario? I mean, they're just all sorts of things that just sort of poke and pop the bubble that this is a conversation. You have to know the structure of these interviews and know what's a great answer in each scenario.
So getting to a little bit of compensation, right?
Mhm.
There are a class of jobs that are right around, between, let's call it the 200 and 300K sort of
Mhm.
total compensation mark. Those jobs are out there, they're competitive, they're difficult. But then there's just like this big jump to more like 500K up, right?
Sure.
They're also out there much more competitive, but you don't see them very often. So, how do executives differentiate themselves as sort of like being the 250 candidate versus the 500K candidate?
There is no magic elixir with this. I think there are 2 parts to it. One is be excellent at the job you're doing. Be excellent at the job you're doing. Sounds simple. You'd be surprised how many people, and I find this the case when people between 35 and 45,
hmm
they have sterling credentials. They've gone to these big companies that have a lot of bling on their resume, and they stay 2 to 3 years and then they leave. Okay. And then they get to like 38, and now they're up for a VP job or an SVP job. And when I compare them to someone else, so at 38, let's say you've been working 12 to 15 years. What if I compare you to somebody that's been in 3 jobs, 5 years each? They were hired as a manager, they became a director, then a VP, and then now they're interviewing for this job that's an SVP job. And you've had 6 jobs. You're not going to have the same body of work. You're not going to have the same body of work. So do well with what's in front of you, right? The grass is not always greener. Do well with what's in front of you. Stay a season at the company. Stay through spring, summer, fall, and winter. Winter is when things are tough. Summer is when things are great. Stay through a season. Let me see if you have some resilience in your leadership style and in your leadership sort of ethos, as opposed to I'm going to trade on being a high potential for these first 15 years. And then when my high potential period ends between 35 and 40, you need to be hired on expertise. And all you have is somebody will give me a shot. I went to Wharton Business School. I worked at GE. Somebody will give me a shot. I worked at Google, went to Stanford, right? At 40, what's the body of work? What's
hmm
the body of work? So do well where you are. And the second thing is you have to learn how to strategically network. You can't
hmm
just put your head down and do great work. You've got to show up as a subject matter expert in your function or in your business. Be on panels, speak at conferences, go to conferences, find a way to deliver your thought leadership. I had a client on a search once. When she got down to the finalists, she put the 2 finalist candidates' names in YouTube. YouTube, not Google, YouTube. One of them had nothing, which I guess most of us, I may have a YouTube show, but most of us don't have YouTube channels. The other person just had a channel, but it was her putting up a tripod at the conferences she's spoken at. Okay. And so client sat there and watched an hour, 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 20 minutes. All right. So now candidate A has got the first round, the second round, and that's it. Candidate B on YouTube, first round, second round, and then 1 extra hour of her future boss watching with rapt attention. Oh my God, she's incredibly dynamic. The other guy's probably dynamic too. There's no proof of it. So the networking, the delivering your thought leadership out there in the market, there's a way of doing this without having to be wildly extroverted, without having to be on social media every single day, that has you establishing an executive posture. You don't have to be Mr. Beast, an executive posture that allows people to understand your brilliance and receive it in an easy to digest way. I tell people until 35, it's what you know. Until 45, it's who you know. After 45, it's who knows you. So it's technical skills, it's networking, and then it's reputation. It's in that last sort of 2/3 of your career that you really got to work on telling your story in your network.
I love that. So switching over to the market overall, it's 2026. Things are a little bit weird. There's a lot happened over the past 6 years or so. Right now, AI is sort of disrupting everything. So I'm curious about what you're seeing. Are companies actually looking for different skill sets now as it relates to AI, whether it be transformation or whatever? Or is that mostly kind of buzzwordy theater, or like what are companies actually posturing for when it comes to what they're looking for skill set wise?
I think AI is going to affect the broader market, especially entry-level roles that require or mandate you analyze information at scale. I think AI can do that in some ways quite effectively. I do think that in certain parts of the market, there is a purge of Black talent. And I think if you're an African-American executive or professional, there is in this moment a purge of Black talent. And it is a different economy if you're African-American. It is vicious, it is pernicious, and it is largely based on race.
When you think about how that happens, like what do you think changed in the market that maybe initialized this purging as you refer to it? What's the difference?
I'm not trying to be stopped on the street, so I will refrain from commenting. I think we all know what the difference maker is in this scenario. I would say that if you're in a job search, you have to accept the cold, hard facts of the situation. And that there are some factors that are impacting you, like your boss, your department, your company may have fired you and others like you, but this is happening systematically and at scale. And if that's the case, then you have to evolve in a way that is faster than that rate of change. I mean, it's simple physics. Maybe it's metaphysics, I don't know, but you have to evolve faster to thrive than the change around you. You got to evolve as fast to simply survive. If you don't evolve as fast as the change around you, then, you're left behind. So with AI, I think creating one vortex, and then you've got another vortex of this great purge, I think people have to think really creatively about their careers. In the first scenario, you have to maximize every possible scenario you have when you get an opportunity to interview or be a candidate on a search. I mean, I have a platform at mysovereignpath.com, which is meant for mid-career and senior leaders to win the game of inches. The people that are in our program are getting jobs. They're getting $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year jobs, when before they were trying on their own, and they weren't, because we give them the techniques and the skills in a reverse engineered process to make sure they are the most competitive candidates out there in the market.
Yep.
Number two, you've got to think holistically about your career options, even if you are in a job search. That job search may take 6 months. It may take 18 months. How are you going to provide for your family? How are you going to put food on the table? Maybe you need to think about a consulting career. How do you stand up a consulting firm? Or how do you put together a portfolio career, which is consulting, advisory work, public speaking, being on some corporate boards. We take a lot of our clients through a process that allows them to think about, what can I do to maximize my impact and my income at this stage of career based on the industry I'm in. But it's a whole different world, and it changed quickly. If it feels like whiplash, you are correctly assessing the market, because 3 years ago, it was a war for talent. Phones were ringing off the hook. Our phone was ringing off the hook. Right now, it's a war for jobs, and that's a very different landscape.
That's interesting. You bring up that point. So given that context, I'm curious, what are the things that senior leaders are struggling with right now that maybe they weren't, call it 4 or 5 years ago? Like, what are those key challenges?
I would say a lot of it is mental. It's just a frame of mind that you have to have. I think people are in denial. If you're not in denial, you are devastated, and you're trying to pick yourself up off the map from being at a company 10 years, 15 years, 25 years. You've exceeded expectations. All of a sudden, January 2025, things change in your department, in your organization, and you are all of a sudden not meeting expectations after being the gold star candidate for 20 years, 5 years, 10 years. I think people have to sort of understand and face the facts and deal with the emotional toll of what's happening.
Yep.
I think that they also have to assess emotionally, do I trust going into a corporation again? And what kind of corporation, what kind of organization would I trust working for? Because I think there's going to be a reckoning. There will be a clap back to the clapback. I think employees and talent are going to eventually have the last say in this, because companies can't survive without talent. And once talent realizes that it has the power to effectuate change, they're going to start demanding a different way of operating. And I think that may take 6 months, it may take 6 years, but there's going to be a reaction to this moment that I think is going to be, I hope companies are ready for it, because again, I think, people have the power, and it's going to be important for professionals to understand the change landscape we are in. I've never seen anything like this in the 30 years of my career. I've never seen a market this dysfunctional, this dynamic, this disruptive. And I think you have to emotionally prepare for that. It's like, I'm from New Orleans, and I remember when Katrina happened, there were people that were like, man, this is the storm that's going to destroy the city. And they left. They saw the change, adapted quickly, got out of town, brought stuff with them. Then you had people that were like, oh man, there could be a lot of flooding with the storm. And they stayed in town, but maybe they went to higher ground. Then the people are like, I'm going to ride out the storm. You can't ride out a storm that is going to devastate the city for 20 or 30 years. Now, again, I know people couldn't leave, but there are some people that willfully decide to stay. And it's the same thing here. If you underreact to this moment and think that your old job is coming back in the federal government, it is likely not coming back. If you are over 50 and you're a person of color, you're going to face 2 kinds of rank discrimination in the marketplace. You have to just emotionally prepare yourself for that. And I see a lot of people to use the expressions out of Who Moved My Cheese, they are hemming and hawing when they should be sniffing and scurrying.
What's the difference between a leader who talks about purpose and one who actually operates with it?
Results.
Key.
Results. When we do a reference of an executive, we're not listening for the reference to bark out all the platitudes about the person while they drive. I will literally tell a reference, hey, let me call you back when I can have you at a desk, because these questions are not things that you can just bark out.
Yeah.
A lot of people say, let me tell you about Johnny. Johnny's great. I work with him. No. I am going to ask the questions. You are going to be interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to probe in depth. I mean, I'm going to go 4, 5, 6 layers down. I may ask 4 to 5 follow-up questions to the answer. What do you mean purpose-driven leader? What kind of followership does she have? What do the followers do? What do the followers who left the fold say about her? What was her worst moment in the job? When she left, what left with her? I mean, there are all sorts of questions to follow up, to probe, so that the person just doesn't give you a platitude. This is not a 4-H recommendation or a Boy Scout recommendation. This is someone is going to be at the helm of a billion-dollar company, a $200 million function, and my client is paying me a 6-figure amount of money to figure out whether you're right for the role. I'm going to ask as many questions as I can in 45 minutes to de-risk that hire.
Yep.
So it's can your record survive scrutiny? And what we provide for our clients is a heck of a lot of scrutiny.
You said something interesting about de-risking that client. One of the things that I tend to say is the hiring process itself is fundamentally a risk mitigation process.
Correct.
Does that ring true to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, once you control for talent and qualification, and I mean, that's probably, all things being equal, the last 36 to 40 candidates are qualified for the job. They could do the job, okay?
Yeah.
But the last 3 are really forcing that client to think about, what season are we in? What leadership style will this person bring? What extra set of leadership competencies we don't have? When I put this person on my team, if I've got 3 other direct reports, now does 1 + 1 + 1 equal 10? Or does it equal, 3.2? Is there overlap?
Yeah.
There's all sorts of complex dimensions that go into that calculus. And in an era where anybody can find your resume, I mean, AI, I can put your name and say, tell me a great podcast host who's a great technology leader, and your name is going to come up, right? If I prompted enough. But that doesn't mean you're right to be the CIO of, the Montreal Canadiens or whatever, or the New Orleans Saints. I mean, it doesn't. It doesn't at all. And that's for me to work with my client to figure out.
Awesome. So I've seen other shows you were on, and in the background of some of those videos, I could see a picture of James Baldwin. I can't see it now, but
I'm
one
switching
of
it
my
out.
yeah,
I'm
okay.
switching it out. My
All right.
mother and sister just moved to France, so I'm
Got
all in
it.
my New Orleans feelings right now.
All right. One of my favorite James Baldwin quotes is, the place in which I'll fit will not exist until I make it. And that's really just resonated with me for years and years. And I'm curious, when you hear that, what does that mean to you, and how does it fit in the context of what you do?
It means that I'm a culture snob.
Okay.
I'm a culture snob in every possible way. I'm a culture snob in my neighborhood. I'm a culture snob in my country. I'm a culture snob in the company that I keep, in terms of, my social environment. I'm a culture snob in terms of where I work. And I don't mean snob in the sense of like it's elitist. I mean it in terms of there is a certain amount of ethics and integrity, a work hard, play hard, a relentless commitment to excellence, a relentless commitment to joy that I bring to every group I'm in. And if I don't find that, I leave. And I have been, for 15 of the 30 years I've worked, it's been at 2 companies I've started. And when I look back on that, it's because I wanted the culture to be a certain way. And I didn't find it where I worked. And I found it in the 2 companies I found it. Now, I wasn't the only keeper of the culture. I did establish maybe some guideposts, but others contributed as much as I did to that culture. Here at Protégé, others have committed mightily to how we operate. And once you experience that kind of culture that feels like a custom made suit, it's hard to go off the rack, as it were.
Great. So coming up on time a little bit, but I did want to ask about this, about the folks who are maybe not quite in senior leadership, but they're, trying to plan their career. What are the things that they should be doing now to kind of set themselves up for senior leadership and call it 3 to 5 years?
I would say if we reverse engineer the notion of strategic networking matters and the work that you do matters, I think if you're 35 or so, you've got to think about, how do I set myself up to strategically network? And you should have a board of advisors in your career. You should have 5 to 7 people that you bounce ideas off of when you are making a strategic move, when you are confounded at work, when you have ethical dilemmas in your career. You should bounce that off of people. I have probably 7, 8 people. We had a company search firm that was interested in acquiring us. And I had to talk to, some friends of mine were hedge fund company CEOs. Others were investment bankers. They gave me the math and the EBITDA and the valuation advice. Others were friends that I've had for 30 years that talked about purpose and control and freedom and impact. And when you amalgamate all that together, well, I was able to make a smart decision, decided to stay independent, and that was my instinct, but I understood the why. So I would say start building that. And when you build that advisory board, guess what? You've got 5, 7 people. They've got networks.
Yep.
And if you stay in contact with those people in your career, a lunch, a coffee, hanging out with them, going to homecoming together, whatever you do, you're going to wind up tapping into their networks. They're tapping into your networks. That's going to wind up building you a secondary layer of maybe another 10 people that are friends of theirs. And so I would start there. And the second thing is to understand what your career algorithm is. I think a lot of people are in the market, they're in their jobs, in their professions, and they're giving the world their B+ game. They're lawyers, they don't want to really be lawyers. They're doctors, they don't really want to be doctors. They're accountants, they don't want to work at the company, but they're too afraid. They don't know what else to do. The money is too good. And so they go through their career and they give their B+ game. And when they get to my age at 55 or their early 50s, what they have is what I call elegant mediocrity. They're not doing bad. They're not doing bad. I mean, they're making good money, but they're not superstars. They're not superstars, right? I mean, BJ Armstrong was a very good basketball player. But when you saw BJ Armstrong, you saw Michael Jordan, you saw like, whoa, there's a big gap there. There's a huge gap between BJ Armstrong and Michael Jordan. There's a huge gap between LeBron James and whoever backs him up. And so someone like me that's trained to evaluate talent, I can see you're not going to BS me. You're not going to BS an experienced recruiter. Like, I have seen LeBron James, Sha'Carri Richardson. I've seen Oprah. I've seen Toni Morrison. I've seen greats in these functions and businesses, and game recognized game. I know what it is. So you've got to make sure you are in the position you're in. You're in the work you are meant to do, and then you're doing it excellently. If you do that, and then create this advisory board and let those rings build around that core group of people, you're going to have a body of work that's purpose-driven, that will emanate and be, your story will be told for you in the market. And when I interview you, I'm going to already know, because that ring will be 4 or 5 layers deep, and somebody will say, you got to call Johnny. Really? You got to call Johnny. One of the trainings I have as a recruiter is, when you stop doing a search, when the names start repeating themselves, right? So let's make it kitchen table conversation. If I'm thinking about, hey, I'm the head of recruiting for the Democratic Party, and I'm going to ask 100 people who should be the nominee. Okay, they're not going to be 1,000 names that come up. There's going to be about 10. Wes Moore, 06, Gavin Newsom, Amy Klobuchar, Kamala Harris, Josh Shapiro. I mean, it's going to be about 10 names. Raphael Warnock. It's going to be 10 names. That happens in search. Why does that happen? Because your reputation precedes you, because that board of advisors that you started at 35 is now an ecosystem of about 40 people that know what you're doing, that are proud of you, that are talking about you in circles you're not even in rooms you're not even in. You're doing great work. You know that you're walking in your purpose. You put those three together, watch out. You're going to kill it. It's a matter of time. It's a matter of time.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Rory, this has been amazing, man. I really appreciate you.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really appreciate you making the time. Are there any words of wisdom that you want to kind of leave the audience with before we wrap?
If you are a person of faith, I could tell you all this stuff that is best practices from 30 years in my career and 20 years as a talent advisor. If you're a person of faith, be prayerful. Be prayerful. Ask the God you worship to order your steps, and then do your part. Be ethical, be honest, work your butt off, and watch what happens as your life and career unfold before you.
Awesome. Well said. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Johnny.
If you enjoyed today's guest and you'd like to help support the show, please subscribe, leave a rating, and share this episode. As always, thank you to our listeners, and be sure to tune in to the next episode of Executive Runtime.